Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goët.
I take an oath before God as enormously consequential. I knew from the outset that being tasked with judging the president, the leader of my own party, would be the most difficult decision I have ever faced. I was not wrong. The House managers presented evidence supporting their case, and the White House counsel disputed that case. In addition, the president's team presented three defenses. First, that there could be no impeachment without a statutory crime. Second, that the Biden's conduct justified the president's actions. And third, that the judgment of the president's actions should be left to the voters. Let me first address those three defenses. The historic meaning of the words high crimes and misdemeanors, the writings of the founders, and my own reasoned judgment convinced me that a president can indeed commit acts against the public trust that are so egregious that while they are not statutory crimes, they would demand removal from office. To maintain that the lack of a codified and comprehensive list of all the outrageous acts that a president might conceivably commit renders Congress powerless to remove such a president defies reason. The President's counsel also notes that Vice President Biden appeared to have a conflict of interest when he undertook an effort to remove the Ukrainian prosecutor general. If he knew of the exorbitant compensation his son was receiving from a company actually under investigation, the Vice President should have recused himself. While ignoring a conflict of interest is not a crime, it is surely very wrong. With regards to Hunter Biden, taking excessive advantage of his father's name is unsavory, but also not a crime. Given that in neither the case of the father nor the son was any evidence presented by the president's counsel that a crime had been committed, the president's insistence that they be investigated by the Ukrainians is hard to explain other than as a political pursuit. There's no question in my mind that were their names not Biden, the president would never have done what he did. The defense argues that the Senate should leave the impeachment decision to the voters. While that logic is appealing to our democratic instincts, it is inconsistent with the Constitution's requirement that the Senate, not the voters, try the president. Hamilton explained that the founders' decision to invest senators with this obligation rather than leave it to the voters was intended to minimize, to the extent possible, the partisan sentiments of the public at large. So the verdict is ours to render under our Constitution. The people will judge us for how well and faithfully we fulfill our duty. The grave question the Constitution tasks senators to answer is whether the president committed an act so extreme and egregious that it rises to the level of a high crime and misdemeanor. Yes, he did. The president asked a foreign government to investigate his political rival. The president withheld vital military funds from that government to press it to do so. The president delayed funds for an American ally at war with Russian invaders. The president's purpose was personal and political. Accordingly, the president is guilty of an appalling abuse of public trust. What he did was not perfect. No, it was a flagrant assault on our electoral rights, our national security, and our fundamental values. Corrupting an election to keep oneself in office is perhaps the most abusive and destructive violation of one's oath of office that I can imagine. In the last several weeks, I've received numerous calls and texts. Many demanded in their words that I stand with the team. I can assure you that that thought has been very much on my mind. You see, I support a great deal of what the president has done. I voted with him 80% of the time. But my promise before God to apply impartial justice required that I put my personal feelings and political biases aside. Were I to ignore the evidence that has been presented and disregard what I believe my oath and the Constitution demands of me for the sake of a partisan end, it would, I fear, expose my character to history's rebuke and the censure of my own conscience. I'm aware that there are people in my party and in my state who will strenuously disapprove of my decision, and in some quarters I will be vehemently denounced. I'm sure to hear abuse from the president and his supporters. Does anyone seriously believe that I would consent to these consequences other than from an inescapable conviction that my oath before God demanded it of me? I sought to hear testimony from John Bolton, not only because I believed he could add context to the charges, but also because I hoped that what he might say could raise reasonable doubt and thus remove from me the awful obligation to vote for impeachment. Like each member of this deliberative body, I love our country. I believe that our Constitution was inspired by Providence. I'm convinced that freedom itself is dependent on the strength and vitality of our national character. As it is with each senator, my vote is an act of conviction. We've come to different conclusions, fellow senators, but I trust we have all followed the dictates of our conscience. I acknowledge that my verdict will not remove the president from office. The results of this Senate court will in fact be appealed to a higher court, the judgment of the American people. Voters will make the final decision, just as the president's lawyers have implored. My vote will likely be in the minority in the Senate. But irrespective of these things, with my vote, I will tell my children and their children that I did my duty to the best of my ability, believing that my country expected it of me. I will only be one name among many, no more, no less, to future generations of Americans who look at the record of this trial. They will note merely that I was among the senators who determined that what the president did was wrong, grievously wrong. We are all footnotes at best in the annals of history, but in the most powerful nation on earth, the nation conceived in liberty and justice, that distinction is enough for any citizen. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
It is Thursday, the 6th of February of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, some people may argue that the grit is not quite jambalaya. Well, I disagree. As I've mentioned before, some of the best shrimp and grits that I've ever gotten, yes, was in New Orleans, albeit at a friend's house. So I've always attributed, well, shrimp and grits to, that southern seaboard area there. And I like to call it my jambalaya. Let's have fun. Well, speaking of fun, it looks like we're going to be having fun times now as the enabling acts are being implemented, looks like one by one. Rather than giving Trump all of the enabling acts at once, they're just going to give him, piecemeal. Work him into it. Give him too much, it might overwhelm him, and he might not be successful because he'd want to do it all at once. But if you push it out piecemeal, kind of just under the radar. Like, for instance, Bill Barr has determined, apparently Bill Barr makes the laws now. Bill Barr has determined that no investigation of a vice presidential candidate, their senior staff, or advisors will be investigated unless a written request is handed to him, and then he will decide whether they will be investigated. So that just means that every single Democratic candidate, their senior staff and advisors are under investigation right now. But don't you dare investigate Trump. Don't you dare. And he's doing it because he doesn't want to be responsible for upending the election of Trump, apparently. I mean, I want to be responsible for that. Oh, yeah. We'll be, just a week before the election, that some sort of untoward evidence will come out that Bill Barr just has to tell everybody. And it won't be about Trump. No, it won't. In fact, if we want to carry this a little bit further, apparently the law is that if Trump is doing something purely to get reelected, it is not against the law. So when GOP operatives, and maybe some Russian troll bots involved in there too, jammed the phone lines in Iowa to the electors who were supposed to be getting results over the phone, when GOP operatives, and maybe some Russian troll bots too, jammed those phones, that was not election interference. That was a lawful effort to re-elect Donald Trump. Now, of course, you have to be president to be able to do this, because say if somebody like Pete, Mayo Pete, did that, he might be asked to join the Trump administration. So we'll have to forget about Mayo Pete. What if, let's say, Bernie did it? Well, we know that Russia and the GOP would really like to have Bernie running, and I like Bernie, but the way that they keep pushing him so much, Bernie's been cheated here and Bernie's been cheated there. We're hearing that from the RNC. All right? And where do they hear it from? Yeah. Starts with a V, ends with a D, and has an LA right in the middle. That's where they hear it. And so, whoever the opposition is pushing or attacking or like I said, pushing to get to the top or attacking the most, I usually don't trust that candidate for obvious reasons. But just say if Bernie and his supporters jam the phone lines, there would be an investigation open. And once again, I have to admit that maybe at least staff and senior advisors who were involved in the phone jamming on Bernie's side, maybe they might be recruited to join the Trump administration and work in his campaign, because they know how to do it too. So maybe Bernie's not quite the good example, So maybe, why don't we think about, let's think if Liz Warren did it. Oh, yeah. We know what would be happening. They would be putting a bag over her head. She'd be frog marched to some, off-site black site. Renditioned, as they say. And Bill Barr would say it's perfectly legal because, she was trying to keep Trump from being reelected now, wasn't she? So I'm wondering how this works as I really start to digest these enabling acts that are coming down. Whatever Trump does to get reelected is lawful. Anything that you do to keep Trump from being reelected is unlawful. I guess that means voting against him is an illegal act. Well, that's what makes America great again, doesn't it? I don't know about the again. Somebody said that this is how Rome fell. Well, Rome fell for a lot of reasons, mostly because they were a murderous, blood-lusting society who had entertainment revolved around lust and blood. Not like us. Oh, no. Oh, we don't have any violent athletic events. Oh, no. Cage matches? Oh, where's the lust involved? Well, you know exactly what I'm talking about there. Mm-hmm. So maybe we are in a Roman decline. Maybe. I like to think that maybe we're not, because we weren't Rome to begin with. I know the colonnades look pretty damn Roman. That's why they named them Georgian instead, just, to give a little bit of distance to the past. But I like to think that maybe our, shining city on a hill wasn't really, Rome of old, but a new city on a hill, gleaming. Might call it Oz, but I think that's just pie in the sky. Could call it Kansas, but then it would just turn out to be Missouri, and then we'd be lost. Oh, yes. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, of course, when the Mitt fits, he had to convict on abuse, but the obstruction charge did not fit Mitt, so you could say Mitt split Mitt, and God made him do it. He did. Or maybe she did. I don't know. We'll have to find out. We all will at one point. Indeed. On the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy's Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. I almost forgot what day I'm in. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Governors of both parties warned that the Trump Medicaid cuts are putting people in danger. And I keep saying that's a feature, not a bug. The Justice Department, not to be confused with my music show, is really, they are the Department of Justice. My music show is the Justice Department Music Sans Frontiere. Oh, yeah, 8 p.m. Sunday nights, Pacific time. Tune in, netrootsradio.com. I do put a podcast out, too, so look for that. Well, the Justice Department, as this offering specifies, opened a civil rights investigation into the Mississippi prison system after a string of inmate deaths in the past few months. Well, why are they doing that? If they're going to bring the chain gang back, why do you need oversight? And a federal judge reversed the convictions of 4 members of a humanitarian aid group for leaving water and food in the desert. Yeah, for people. They are arrested for that. That's illegal. Well, the judge ruled that Trump violated their religious liberty. We'll see if Bill Barr allows that. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Angela Merkel's conservatives broke a post-war taboo of shunning the far right when they negotiated the election of a state premier with the white nationalist Alternative for Germany party. And a record number of anti-Semitic incidents have been logged in Britain again. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link, definitely located by Superior Graphic Design. That graphic design was by Tom. Thank you, Tom. Well, the chat room link is right there by the social media scroll. Isn't that adept? Oh, I love it. And Kelly Lincoln takes care of monitoring the chat room. So if you go there, you'll be monitored and engaged by Kelly. and others too. So do. If you would then take a gander across the page, to the leftish, by the way, because nothing is absolute in this universe. So go to the leftish of the page at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, and hopefully you'll notice our Patreon link. And what is that? Well, that's how you become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. You know, this little powerhouse of resistance has been resisting 24/7, 365 for almost, well, over 8 years. Not quite 9 years, but we're well on our way now. We're almost 9 years old. And we've been able to do that because of folks like you who help us pay our bills. And, of course, as those of you have heard before, I know it's a broken record, but, yeah, we have to get some newish machinery. Got to replace the old workhorses. They won't be put out to pasture. They'll just be working a lot less and in a lot less critical situations where you really need, you know, the consistency of a good machine. We are able to do this because of your generosity, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and that's sincere. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so by going to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that also. Hey, he does interstitials, a lot of the voiceovers. Oh, thank you, Tom. Thank you. Follow me on Twitter @Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Coz about 10 minutes before showtime and put that out on Twitter and Facebook. I know, Facebook. But all the social media platforms that we can get them on. And so look for that 10 minutes before showtime. You can also follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest. But most importantly, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. And they're found everywhere now. There's billions of them. You can find us in the W's. And if you wanted to push us up in the search, rate us where they tell you to rate us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All righty, well, let's get into this first offering in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. You know this is a salon. All right, you just got to close your eyes. Pretend you're in, you know, a nicely lit little salon. All right. And I got to say, I'm not so minimal that I take on the Scandinavian design of minimalist interior design. But I'm certainly not going to have like a lot of clutter that you might find in some old European domiciles. Mm-hmm. Those domiciles of wealth are sometimes overly cluttered. Ew. Things tastefully placed, and not a lot of them. Okay, imagine that. But the most dominant feature in this salon is indeed, walls of cookbooks. All right. And then we get back into the back where the chef's table is. That's where we have the little special amuse-bouche. Little things, little kiss. A little kiss. Right at the end. Because we do it differently here. We're Americans. In Europe, you'd get the amuse-bouche first. Here we do it at the end. Or at least in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Because, well, sometimes compromises have to be made to put on a show. Ask Donald Trump. All right, let's get into this offering. It is out of the Associated Press by way of the American Independent. Governors of both parties are warning that a little-noticed regulation proposed by the Trump administration could lead to big cuts in Medicaid, restricting their ability to pay for health care for low-income Americans. That's not by accident now, you know. Of course not. The arcane fiscal accountability rule proposed by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, would tighten federal oversight and approval over complex financing strategies states have long used to help pay for their share of the $600 billion program. Also targeted are certain payments to hospitals that treat many low-income patients. Public comments closed last week amid a chorus of criticism from hospitals, nursing homes, insurers, doctors, and advocates for the poor. You know, of course, the only ones who want all this to come down are the orthopedic surgeons and all the high-digit ones who make, like, 4-digit salaries in a year. Salaries? Income in a year. Those guys don't get salaries. They just make the big bucks. And why would they want to treat low-income people? There's no money in that. My God, the only money in diabetes medicine is to cause it to be so expensive. I mean, when you got a captive market, where are they going to go? Against the backdrop of an election year, governors are warning the administration of potentially dire consequences. States may be unable to adequately fund their Medicaid programs, which could lead to unintended consequences that would negatively impact Medicaid beneficiaries across the country. My governor, Kate Brown of Oregon, said, along with Charlie Baker, a Republican of Maine. All right. But CMS Administrator Seema Verma says the vast health care program needs closer scrutiny and has expressed concerns about shady financing schemes that abuse the system and drive up taxpayer costs. Really now, Vima? Is that what you're doing? It's all about the corruption. You want your share because Donald Trump wants his. Donald Trump is mad at the states for not kicking up money to the boss. He pays out all this money for the protection and they never pay anything back. Medicaid covers more than 70 million people, or about 1 in 5 Americans. That includes many pregnant women, newborns, elderly nursing home residents, and severely disabled people. In states that have accepted the Affordable Care Act's Medicaid expansion, it's also a mainstay of coverage for low-income adults. Medicaid is the backbone of the U.S. healthcare system. You weaken the backbone, and the whole system gets scoliosis. Well, as I've said before many, many times, property is always more valuable when delivered vacant to a hostile foreign power. Michael Balsamo and Emily Waxter Pettis of the Associated Press bring us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Justice Department, not to be confused with my music show, the Justice Department on Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Pacific. I think they're talking about the Department of Justice. I'm pretty sure they are. Has opened a civil rights investigation into the Mississippi prison system after a string of inmate deaths in the past few months, officials said. Federal prosecutors are looking into conditions at 4 state prisons after the deaths of at least 15, that's 15, inmates since late December. The investigation is examining whether state corrections officials are adequately protecting prisoners from physical harm, and will look into whether there are adequate health care and suicide prevention services. Well, I think they're suicide-causing centers. I don't think they have much in the way of prevention now, do you? In Mississippi, like I said, if you're bringing the chain gang back, you're not going to coddle them with some sort of psych help now, are you? The investigation by the Justice Department Civil Rights Division, I thought they got rid of that. Wait till Bill Barr finds out. Will specifically focus on conditions at the Mississippi State Penitentiary in Parkman, the South Mississippi Correctional Institute, the Central Mississippi Correctional Facility, and the Wilkerson County Correctional Facility, the Justice Department said. Not to be confused with my music show on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Pacific. I think they mean the Department of Justice. Okay? The Wilkerson facility holds state prisoners, and the state pays a private company, there it is, a private company by the name of Management and Training Corporation to operate it. Put it into private hands, and what happens? They cut costs because that's how you make a buck. And you're bringing the chain gang back. You can't spend money on these high-priced commie liberal psychologists now, can you? Look, you have a steady line of slave labor coming in. If you lose a few along the way, you got to make room for the new ones now, don't you? The use of such investigations examining the patterns and practices of law enforcement agencies has been curtailed under the Trump administration compared with their use during the Obama administration, because Obama coddled these guys instead of making their lives so miserable they wanted to kill themselves, and did. Now, some of the inmate deaths in recent weeks happened during confrontations between inmates, but most were suicides. Of the Tucson Sentinel brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A federal judge has reversed the convictions of 4 members of No More Deaths, finding that the members of the humanitarian aid group successfully established that they were exercising sincere religious beliefs when they placed water and food for migrants in Arizona's protected Cabeza Prieta National Wildlife Refuge in the summer of 2017. In a 22-page opinion, U.S. District Judge Rosemary Marquez wrote that Natalie Hoffman, Una Holcomb, Madeline Hoos, and Zachalia Orcazo McCormick had met their burden of establishing that their activities were exercises of their sincere religious beliefs under the guidelines set by the Religious Freedom Restoration Act passed by Congress in 1993. Well, that's going to change real quick now, isn't it? Wait until Bill Barr finds out what they've done. Furthermore, the government had failed to demonstrate that the charges filed against the 4 volunteers were the least restrictive means of accomplishing a compelling interest. On January 18th, 2019, following a short bench trial, U.S. District Judge Bernardo Velasco found all 4 volunteers guilty of federal misdemeanors. The volunteers have been cited by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service officers during an incident in the summer of 2017. Hoffman was found guilty of operating a motor vehicle in a wilderness area and entering a national wildlife refuge without a permit. Well, they should have just told the officers they were trying to build a wall. Holcomb, Hoos, and Orcazo McCormick were found guilty of entering without a permit and abandonment of property, a Class B misdemeanor. You leave water and food for migrants, you're going to jail. You're littering with this aid. Well, the volunteers drove a Dodge truck down a poorly maintained road in the wilderness area in August of 2017 and left 1-gallon bottles of water and milk crates, along with other supplies, in an attempt to stave off the deaths of people who attempt to cross Cabeza Prieta, where hundreds of bodies have been found over the last few years across the rugged and remote terrain. A Fish and Wildlife Service officer was notified that the volunteers for the humanitarian aid group were within the refuge and went to investigate. I wonder who the narc was. And after interviewing the women, he escorted them out of the area, collected the supplies that they had left, and then he dumped them out on camera. Because cruelty is the point now, don't you know? During the sentencing hearing, Velasco said that while he didn't have any doubt in his mind that the women would not violate federal law again, he felt it was necessary to tell no more deaths that they should be aware that their conduct may be against the law, and the more cruel we are, the more the message gets out to these other do-gooders now, doesn't it? Well, Marquez wrote that the violations were committed in the course of leaving supplies of food and water in the area of desert wilderness where people frequently die of dehydration and exposure, and that the 4 women were affiliated with the Unitarian Universalist Church. They entered the refuge without a permit, drove on a restricted access road, and left food and water for those in need to find. Defendants argue that those actions taken with the avowed goal of mitigating death and suffering were sincere exercises of religion, and that their prosecution is barred by the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Well, Bill Barr said, where's the Leviticus? There's no Leviticus involved in this. People are made to suffer, and suffer they will. It's God's law. Well, back to this, Judge Marquez. The depth, importance, and centrality of these beliefs caused defendants to restructure their lives to engage this volunteer work, and she concluded that their prosecution for their actions substantially burdens their religious exercise. In a sharply issued criticism, Marquez rejected the government's arguments that the 4 volunteers furthered and encouraged illegal smuggling activity. The government seems to rely on a deterrence theory, reasoning that preventing clean water and food from being placed on the refuge would increase the risk of death or extreme illness for those seeking to cross unlawfully, which in turn would discourage or deter people from attempting to enter without authorization, she wrote. In other words, the government claims a compelling interest in preventing defendants from interfering with a border enforcement strategy of deterrence by death. Marquez further wrote, this gruesome logic is profoundly disturbing. Well, that brings us to our break period, and we better get on with our break. And when we come back, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we are going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets and you. You are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That day began the week-long general strike in Seattle, Washington. As World War I drew to a close, many workers in the city were frustrated by 2 years without pay increases due to the war. 35,000 workers in the shipyards walked off the job. Workers from most of the 110 union locals across the city voted to support the general strike. At 10 a.m. on February 6th, the citywide strike began. As many as 65,000 workers, or a fifth of the entire workforce of the city, walked off the job. They were met by a combined force of the police and the military. It has been nearly a century since the Seattle General Strike. This unprecedented stand by the city's workers has been remembered and commemorated in many ways. Perhaps the most innovative memorial came in the form of a rock opera. In 1985, Rob Rosenthal set the story of the strike to music. He based the lyrics on research and interviews he did as a graduate student at UC Santa Barbara over the course of 10 years. A band named The Fuse formed to record the 21-song album. The final project was a blend of rock, blues, and folk. The music tells the story of a fictional man who comes to Seattle looking for work in the shipyards during World War I, joining the labor movement and the strike. What labor history event would you like to hear set to music?
Without our muscle, without our brain, nothing would ever grow. We run it all. We run it all.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Who's in the city? Unless we say so. Let the bosses curse. I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Well, it's all over but the crying. Donald Trump was acquitted Wednesday by the U.S. Senate on the 2 articles of impeachment passed by the House: abuse of power and obstruction of Congress.
The president says he will address this vote tomorrow, declaring victory tonight. But this is not the bipartisan acquittal his allies wanted. This vote now closing a chapter that will mark President Trump's legacy forever. The 4.5-month impeachment saga over in just 22 history-making minutes.
Ms. Collins, not guilty. Mr. McConnell, not guilty.
The president acquitted of abusing power and obstructing Congress.
Donald John Trump be, and he is hereby acquitted of the charges in said articles.
But the vote was not on party lines, not after Utah Republican Mitt Romney chose to convict the president on one of the charges, pressuring Ukraine to investigate his political rivals.
The president's purpose was personal and political.
Democrats stayed united.
Mr. Manchin, guilty.
How damaging is it that this is now not a bipartisan acquittal?
It was a bipartisan opposition to the impeachment articles themselves.
It would have taken 67 senators to remove the president after House Democrats impeached him. But given the chamber's Republican majority, that always seemed a non-starter.
The state of our union is stronger than ever before.
It comes at a moment of bitter partisanship after a State of the Union speech that began with an apparent missed handshake and ended with ripped remarks. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi defending her decision to tear up her copy of the president's speech moments after he delivered it.
Because it was a manifesto of mistruths.
Vice President Pence firing back.
And I think it was a new low. I wasn't sure if she was ripping up the speech or ripping up the Constitution.
The State of our Union tonight divided. Hallie Jackson, NBC News, Capitol Hill.
Senator Mitt Romney of Utah was the lone Republican to vote to convict Trump on count 1, abuse of power, thereby robbing Trump of the ability to declare the impeachment a partisan hoax. This makes Romney the first and so far only senator to vote to remove a president of his own party. In an emotional floor speech, Romney explained his reasoning.
The allegations made in the articles of impeachment are very serious. As a senator juror, I swore an oath before God to exercise impartial justice. I am profoundly religious. My faith is at the heart of who I am. I take an oath before God as enormously consequential. I knew from the outset that being tasked with judging the president, the leader of my own party, would be the most difficult decision I have ever faced. I was not wrong. The House managers presented evidence supporting their case, and the White House counsel disputed that case. In addition, the president's team presented 3 defenses. First, that there could be no impeachment without a statutory crime. Second, that the Biden's conduct justified the president's actions. And third, that the judgment of the president's actions should be left to the voters. Let me first address those 3 defenses. The historic meaning of the words high crimes and misdemeanors, the writings of the founders, and my own reasoned judgment convince me that a president can indeed commit acts against the public trust that are so egregious that while they are not statutory crimes, they would demand removal from office. To maintain that the lack of a codified and comprehensive list of all the outrageous acts that a president might conceivably commit renders Congress powerless to remove such a president defies reason. The grave question the Constitution tasks senators to answer is whether the president committed an act so extreme and egregious that it rises to the level of a high crime and misdemeanor. Yes, he did. The president asked a foreign government to investigate his political rival. The president withheld vital military funds from that government to press it to do so. The president delayed funds for an American ally at war with Russian invaders. The president's purpose was personal and political. Accordingly, the president is guilty of an appalling abuse of public trust. What he did was not perfect. No, it was a flagrant assault on our electoral rights, our national security, and our fundamental values. Corrupting an election to keep oneself in office is perhaps the most abusive and destructive violation of one's oath of office that I can imagine.
The results of Monday's Iowa caucuses continue to trickle in. As of early Thursday morning, 97% of the precincts had been counted. Bernie Sanders is now leading the popular vote, while Pete Buttigieg appears to be holding on to the lead in the number of state delegate equivalents by the thinnest of margins. Buttigieg at this point has 26.2% of the delegates, with Bernie Sanders sitting at 26.1%. Senator Elizabeth Warren was in third with 18.2%, followed by former Vice President Joe Biden with 15.8%, and Senator Amy Klobuchar with 12.2%. On Thursday morning, Donald Trump participated in the 68th annual National Prayer Breakfast, making me again ask the question, why do we have a National Prayer Breakfast? And of course, Trump used the occasion to crow about his acquittal while taking jabs at those who tried to hold him accountable.
As everybody knows, my family, our great country, and your president have been put through a terrible ordeal by some very dishonest and corrupt people. They have done everything possible to destroy us, and by so doing, very badly hurt our nation. They know what they are doing is wrong, but they put themselves far ahead of our great country. Weeks ago and again yesterday, courageous Republican politicians and leaders had the wisdom, fortitude, and strength to do what everyone knows was right.
Well, the ratings are in for Tuesday night's State of the Union address, and Donnie Boy can be proud. About 37.2 million people watched, making it the smallest live television audience for a presidential address to Congress since former President Barack Obama's final State of the Union address in 2016. Oh, and one more bit of news. Senator Bernie Sanders' campaign is looking well beyond New Hampshire, announcing a massive $25 million haul in the month of January alone. Not too shabby. A $5.5 million ad buy split among 10 states was also announced. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com. While you're there, please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 41 degrees Fahrenheit. We're supposed to be a bit warmer today in the mid-50s. We did have quite a bit of precipitation, not in the terms of large drops, but steady light rain beginning yesterday, about 4 o'clock local time, and continuing all night, and it still is a bit wet out there as I speak here in the mothership. I'm actually in the mothership. So, but we are expecting to have a bit of a supposed drying out period, only meaning that we won't have drops of rain falling from the sky, just mist. That's called drying out here for the next week, and then about a 1/4 inch of rain beginning a week from tomorrow. We'll see. That's a lot of time between then and then. So, cloudy skies will prevail throughout the day. Winds are light and variable, and we'll have partly cloudy skies this evening with more clouds overnight, low around 40. And tomorrow we should be mostly sunny with a high in the mid-50s. Pollen is rated at none. Air quality index is in the good range at 24 parts per million. The daytime UV index is low at 2. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.33 inches. Visibility is down to 4 miles, and relative humidity is at 98% because we're drying out. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 50 degrees and sunny. Paris is 50 degrees and sunny. Rome is 54 degrees and sunny. Kyiv is 33 with a light rain. Boy, that's close to being snow. Let's see. Kabul is 30 degrees and fair. Hong Kong is 60 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 32 and clear. Brr. Sydney, Australia is 69 degrees with a rain shower. Yeah, they have typhoons coming through to, pretty much put out all the fires and blow everything that's not attached to the ground away. Bittersweet now, isn't it? San Francisco, California is 45 and partly cloudy. And New York is 41 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and who can blame them for being anonymous when you're talking about Nazis? Are they Nazis? Yes, they are. A German state premier was elected with the support of the nationalist Alternative for Germany, or AfD party, and Chancellor Angela Merkel's conservatives, shattering the post-war consensus among established parties of shunning the far right. Well, that's a nice way of putting the Alternative for Germany, let's be clear. Thomas Kemmerich, a little-known liberal Free Democrat, became the first state premier elected with the support of the AfD, with whom Merkel's conservative Christian Democrats sided, to the disgust of her national coalition partners, the CDU, and all the other established parties that previously ostracized the AfD over what they say are racist views held by some of its members. Come on, some. The whole reason for being part of the AfD is because they're racist. And that's just a nice way of calling them Nazis. You can't really call them Nazis because it's illegal to fly the Nazi flag, so they do fly the next best thing, and that's, the Confederate flag. That's right. Merkel's Social Democrat National Coalition allies accused her CDU of backtracking on a pledge never to cooperate with a far-right party. The CDU rejected the accusation, saying it was not responsible for how AfD lawmakers voted, and the ballot was secret. The events in Thuringia break a taboo in the history of political democracy in the Federal Republic, SPD Finance Minister Olaf Scholz tweeted. Very serious questions arise for us with the CDU's federal leadership. Now, the SPD is unlikely to ditch Merkel's national coalition over the vote in Thuringia, but the center-left party said its supporters would hold a protest outside the CDU headquarters in Berlin.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Michael Holden of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Oh, look, on the heels of the Nazis in coalition in Germany to elect, to become kingmakers, let's be clear, comes this story. The number of anti-Semitic incidents logged in Britain last year hit record levels yet again. Amid accusations the opposition Labour Party had failed to tackle the issue within its ranks, a Jewish advisory board said. The Community Security Trust, which advises Britain's estimated 280,000 Jews on security matters, said there had been 1,805 incidents in 2019, a rise of 7%, and the fourth consecutive year the figure had reached a new high. Well, they did it again. Well, we got to fight this. We have to name it, identify it, call it out for what it is, and get rid of it. And we know what to do. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. And, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast all day and all night. We'll meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.